for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad and NSLI-Y. And as you just heard, we're going to be recording this this video. A lot of people have asked about that, so it's definitely something we want to provide to everyone. My name is Sky Henry. I'm a program manager for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. I work at American Councils for National Education. We're the organization who administers the NSLI-Y and Flex and Yes grants from the U.S. Department of State. I've worked at American Councils on youth programming for about 14 years, and I will let my colleague Emily introduce herself.
Hi, my name is Emily Matz-Henry. I'm the Senior Program Manager for NSLI-Y Administration at American Councils. I have been in this role working on NSLI-Y since 2012. And prior to my time at American Councils, I worked on 2 other U.S. government programs for critical language studies. So happy to be here today. And we'll pass it back to Sky to start our presentation.
All right, Libby, if you could go to the next slide. Here's a little bit of our webinar overview for the day. So we'll just do an overview of the 3 programs and kind of what they have in common and some basics about them. We'll go over some FAQs, so frequently asked questions. Emily and I have, as you heard, been working on these programs for a long time, and we hear a lot of the same questions over and over. So we wanted to just put those questions out front from the very beginning so that you don't have to wonder about them. And then we will point you to some resources where you can find out more information from staff, but also from participants and alumni of the programs. And then we should have some time left for your questions. I believe there is a question box where you can put your questions in. If you think of any along the way, go ahead and put them in, but I think it's also good to kind of wait and see. We might be able to answer your questions even before you ask them. Okay, so first, what is citizen diplomacy? So glad you asked. Citizen diplomacy is what these programs are all about. So I mentioned the U.S. Department of State. These are all U.S. Department of State programs. And the reason that the U.S. Department of State funds these programs is under this idea of citizen diplomacy. So that means that it's not just people wearing business suits and with fancy titles like ambassador or working in embassies all over the world who can create dialogue and sign important treaties and do these kind of official levels of diplomacy, of making sure that we have relationships with countries around the world. It can be like ordinary people like you and me, like participants on this program, people who live in another culture and create bonds and linkages and create ultimately, hopefully, world peace through doing this. So the role of participants of this program is a lofty one, and it's not just kind of a free study abroad program. There are important goals and an important mission behind the creation of all of these programs.
And I'll share a little bit of an overview of NSLI-Y. NSLI-Y is a national security language initiative for youth, and it provides U.S. students merit-based scholarships to study critical needs languages and cultures, and hopefully spark a lifetime of interest in those languages and cultures. We offer summer and academic year scholarships for overseas immersion in Arabic, Chinese, Hindi, Indonesian, Korean, Persian, Russian, and Turkish, in countries where those languages are spoken. We also offer a virtual NSLI-Y program as a virtual exchange for beginner in 6 of those languages. And the application for that program is also open and due October 20th, but I'll focus most of my comments today on the overseas program. Back to you, Sky.
All right, so Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, in comparison to NSLI-Y, even though they're all citizen diplomacy for high school and gap year students, it is primarily a cultural exchange program. So instead of focusing on language proficiency, either learning a new language or improving the language you already study, Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad, they are both academic year programs, so 10-month programs where you go live in a host family, go to a local high school, school, and your job as a Flex Abroad or Yes Abroad participant is to build relationships and come to understand the local host culture and community, the way people think, to share your experiences as an American, and to try and come to an understanding about the world you're in and to bring it home. So you do definitely learn a language as part of these programs. You're provided with language tutoring. So I have yet to meet a Yes Abroad or Flex Abroad student who doesn't come home like speaking the language of the country they're in. But the primary focus isn't going to language class every day. It's going to a regular high school in your host country.
Some may ask, why should you study abroad in high school? Of course, we are believers, but some of the reasons why we think study abroad in high school is a good idea. It's, a really unique educational opportunity at a formative time in your life. We believe cross-cultural youth exchange is really powerful as it promotes future leadership. High school students in programs like NSLI-Y, Yes Abroad, Flex Abroad can become really immersed in their host community, connect with peers abroad, and support citizen diplomacy even as a teenager. Our alumni report that their participation in these programs have really enhanced their lifetime of interest in cross-cultural learning, and in NSLI's case, also language learning. Exchange programs have really helped our alumni refine their future academic and career goals, and they're able to explore new interests on program. And while it's not a direct goal of our programs, exchange programs really help our alumni gain a lot of new skills that are useful for the rest of your life, including problem solving, collaboration, and cross-cultural communication. So many skills can be developed. And what does
go ahead. I was going to say what's the scholarship cover? That's something that is not only a frequently asked question, but it's something we really want to get to the bottom of, because I think a lot of people don't understand, no matter how many times we advertise it, that these programs are full scholarships. So the scholarship covers round trip airfare to your host country, and also to any pre-program, pre-departure orientation. It covers medical benefits. It covers room and board while you're overseas. For Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, that means living with a host family and eating with them. It covers school tuition, if that's applicable, or enrollment in a school, and it covers a monthly stipend. So this depends on the host country that you're in. And then Emily, did you want to mention something about NSLI? I'm sorry, I cut you off.
No, it's about the same, but what our attendees should know is that the scholarship doesn't cover your passport. That's one sort of minor thing, as well as, maybe medical visits or immunizations before you travel. But for the large part, the scholarships cover all program-related expenses. So Libby, I think we can go to the next slide.
Great. Do you want to start? You want me to start?
Go ahead, Sky.
All right, so the big one is, and I think this might be relevant for a lot of parents or caregivers too, who takes care of me or my child when they're overseas? And there's a couple answers to this. One of them is us. We are responsible for you. Emily and I actually spend a lot of time thinking about participants and working with participants and managing participants while they're overseas. So our office and our program staff are arranging setup for you in country and helping you throughout the way. In all of our host countries for all of the programs, there is a staff person on the ground who manages the day-to-day of that. So for, I'll just talk about Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, and I can let Emily talk a little bit more about NSLI-Y. For Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad, this is a local coordinator or a local liaison who lives in your host community, and also the host family that the student lives in. So the host family takes care of you and your kind of personal needs on a day-to-day basis, and the local coordinator or liaison is responsible for managing the program-related aspects and is there for support or guidance or to help solve a problem if something comes up, and that person communicates with our office in DC on a usually weekly, if not more frequent basis.
In the case of NSLI-Y, I would just emphasize, similar structure as Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad as far as support. The many US based implementing organizations are on the NSLI-Y website on our homepage, so you can take a look at those. So the US staff are certainly involved. There's local staff that provide support, but to Sky's point, the local coordinator, resident director is really critical in providing support to students, helping them to adjust to the new environment. Of course, those staff people are working with lots of participants, so they can't serve as the same role as mom and dad at home, but they can certainly work to help support the student and help them adjust to their new environment. And we also consider host families, to be part of the care for participants. They're carefully vetted and oriented before they host our students. So it's going to be different than at home, but we do think we have a robust support structure. So I'll go into the next question, which is, what is it like to live in a host family? It is a rewarding and challenging experience, certainly. So host families are going to come in all different shapes and sizes. Not all host families might have young children or teen children, but lots of different shapes and sizes. It's really important for participants to be flexible and be open to dealing with a new environment, being part of the family, not necessarily a guest. So chipping in with chores and communicating often with their host family. It can be hard to navigate the cultural and language barriers, but again, it can also be really rewarding opportunity. So the host families allow participants to learn more about daily life, culture, and hopefully build relationships, probably practice the target language. And for a lot of our alumni, they report this being one of the most meaningful parts of the program. Sky, anything else to add?
Nope, you nailed it. Just to reiterate, this is, like you said, one of the most challenging aspects of the program, but one of the most rewarding, absolutely. I'll go into how long the programs are. So this is a question that I actually wish that people asked more. So I'm just going to ask it for you. So Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad are both 10-month programs. Most programs for both Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad leave kind of in the late summer, early fall, but they can leave as early as July for next year. That'll be July 2023, or as late as September 2023. I would say most of the programs leave sometime in late July, late August, but it can span from July to September. And they return home. We usually have about half the countries come home in May. So that'd be May 2024 or June 2024. And everyone must travel along with the program. You can't arrange your own travel or tack on travel afterwards or things like that.
For NSLI-Y, the summer programs are 6 to 8 weeks. The summer departures are typically between mid-June to late June, with most arrivals back to the US in early August. Our academic year programs are 8 to 10 months, and most of those departures are taking place in September, most likely early September. One thing to note too, for NSLI-Y, Yes Abroad, Flex Abroad, there's a fair amount of pre-program preparation before departure. That can include practical things like working to obtain your visa, but also we're working hard to get you ready for the overseas experience. So there are webinars and other types of things that will be expected of you before your pre-program orientation. So the next question is, can I get academic credit? This can be a complicated one. All right, for NSLI-Y, we cannot guarantee that credit can be transferred back to your home school. We encourage applicants to talk about it with their home school and possibly your counselor. We are able to provide academic year students typically with some documentation of their coursework, which will hopefully help you obtain credit at your home school. All summer and academic year students will take what's called an oral proficiency interview, and you can use that certificate to hopefully be able to obtain maybe credit or be able to jump levels in the language. So it will really depend on your school, and it can't necessarily depend on the program. Another kind of common issue related to academic credit is online classes. Generally, we are preferring that you avoid online classes, but I encourage you to look at the terms and conditions to read a little bit more about that. Sky, pointing it back to you.
All right, so just to reiterate what Emily said, this is a great question for your American high school, right? We cannot control what your American high school does or what they'll accept for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. You're going to be going to a local high school. And you know, the funny thing about high schools in Macedonia or Kazakhstan or Poland is that they take the same subjects that you probably do in high school too. They take science, history, English, math. And so the chances that you're going to be studying something locally that your American high school would also ask you to study is really high. So hopefully you can talk to your school and they can be accommodating about figuring out a best way to do this. For most of the countries that Yes Abroad is in, and Flex Abroad too, there is a good chance of helping you get some sort of transcript. It'll say, you know, your name and the class you're in and the classes you took and the grades you took. That being said, many of the countries where participants go, if you're still in high school, many of those countries, you'll go to school in English, right? In Ghana, India, the Philippines, Malaysia, English is the local language that people go to school in. In some of our other countries, we send students to English language schools. However, not every single host country does that. In some of our host countries, you go to a school, high school in local language. That being said, even if you can't get an official transcript from the school, the program can work with you to, like Emily said, provide documentation of the coursework that you did take. And many of the alumni report being able to do this. If your initial guidance counselor says, no, can't do that, I do encourage you to push back and talk to them and ask your parents or caregivers to ask them why. Sometimes just pushing back and explaining the purpose of the program, the mission of the programs, that it's a State Department program, that it's quite prestigious, can add a lot of value to your life and the life of the American high school. I think this can go a long way. And if you ever have more questions about that, you can definitely call our office or email us, and we're happy to work with you separately on that. I saw a question pop up here, Emily, that's kind of relevant to this a little bit. It's, can my kid be placed in a certain grade overseas, or do they have to do the same grade that they already did? I will say that is totally up to the local school. Generally speaking, the YES program, like NSLI-Y, is administered by a number of different organizations. American Councils manages the entire administration, but we also do placement in 4 of the YES Abroad countries. So I can tell you that in American Council's placed countries, we generally don't place students in 12th grade, for example, even if they're a 12th grader, because in these other countries in 12th grade, you're often studying for a graduation exam, and the type of experience that you would have as an exchange student is less realistic, and you don't get to spend as much time with your classmates and doing the things that you signed up to do when you do the program. So we can't guarantee class placement the same way that we can't guarantee, if you get grades back at home. All right, can I pick which country I live in? So for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, you're applying to the program. So you're applying to the Flex Abroad program or the Yes Abroad program, and you can rank your country preferences. After we decide on who's going to be a finalist, after we go through an evaluation period and then a selection period, then we place participants in the host countries based on a number of factors. One of those factors are your country rankings, but the other factor will be age and grade eligibility, the parameters of which are given to us by our host schools. So some host schools say we're only going to take 11th and 12th graders, or 10th and 11th graders, or gap year students. You can talk to alumni about this on the program. If you are talking to alumni, one word of caution that I wouldn't listen to everything they have to say, because sometimes we're able to negotiate with a host school and get more access to a different grade. So while some countries have a tradition of hosting, gap year students only, that can always change. And we're always trying to make sure that each host country can host as many different types of people as possible.
For NSLI-Y, we are focused on language learning, and we ask our applicants to indicate 2 language preferences. So that would be example of, preference 1, Arabic academic year, preference 2, Arabic summer. So you can pick up to 2 preferences. You can see on our website which countries are hosts for each language, and you'll learn your placement at the time of notification if you're selected. So you'll receive information about your program, what host city you're in, your implementing organization, program dates. So we ask that you, think sort of broadly about your language choices, not be overly focused on one particular location. For several of our languages, there are multiple placement options. So we encourage you to stay flexible and stay focused on the language learning. Right, I will go to the next question, which what are the eligibility requirements? Since these are State Department programs for U.S. citizens, you have to be a U.S. citizen at the time of application, enrolled in high school at the time of application. That can mean students who are seniors can apply. There is a date of birth range for each program on the particular program website, so we encourage you to check those. And for NSLI-Y, we do have a GPA requirement of 2.5 GPA out of 4-point scale or equivalent. There are other details on the program's websites about your eligibility if you participated in another ECA program before, or if a family member is employed by the Department of State. Skye, anything further to add there?
No, I saw a question pop up in one of the typed questions that was about additional eligibility requirements, especially if you, based on your parents' work. So I would just say, echoing what Emily said, check the program's websites for more details. Those requirements are given to us by the Department of State. All right. Do you need language experience to apply? For Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, actually for all the programs, the answer is no, you definitely don't. You can, and that's great, but you definitely don't need to speak a language to apply for this program or to get accepted. For Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, you will receive approximately 2-week kind of boot camp for the language upon arrival, and then have kind of regular or supplemental tutoring after that while you're living in a host family that speaks that language likely most of the time, and going to a host high school where if the instruction is not in that language, then everyone still speaks that language in the breaks. And so you'll be living that language. The only thing that I will say about language requirements is that for placement in Senegal and Morocco, you do need to have some previous experience with French. The reason is this: both countries utilize French and a local language equally and in different ways, and asking you to learn 2 languages at the same time that you need to function in, either at school or in your host family, is really a reach. And we don't want to put participants who are already adapting to a new culture trying to learn 2 languages. So for Senegal and Morocco, you would need to have previous experience with French. You can just note this in your application, and we will reach out to all applicants with a possibility of a French assessment after the application deadline.
Yeah, again, for NSLI-Y, we don't have a language requirement for this program, and we're able to support students of all different language levels. That doesn't mean individual tutoring for every participant, but we are able to differentiate instruction and have some sites that support higher level learners or intermediate learners, and some sites for beginners. We also have pre-program language expectations for students who are chosen for the program. So you have a little bit of survival skills on arrival. And, it's important that NSLI-Y applicants are really ready to study the languages. That's a really important focus of our program. But I would estimate 30 to 50% of past participants started the program without prior language experience, and about 50 to 60% have come to the program with experience. So we're able to support different levels. All right, what makes a successful applicant and participant? In the case of NSLI-Y, we think it's important for applicants to have some understanding of what the program is all about, that you're ready for intensive language learning, that you're ready for cultural overseas immersion experience, you're motivated to study the language, ready to try to practice the language outside of class time. You understand how studying this language and participating in NSLI-Y relates to your future goals and are able to articulate that. And a tip that I would give anyone applying for any of these 3 programs is to spend some time looking at the program goals on our website and trying to reflect on those and how you prepare your application. I know Skye will elaborate on this more, but I would say too, adjusting to an overseas environment is challenging and exciting. But you have to come, ready with some skills and, readiness and maturity to be able to adjust to that. So I'm going to pass it to you, Skye, to elaborate on that.
Yeah, so we get this question a lot, and it's often more phrased as, how do I get in, right? And as somebody who's worked on this program for a long time and worked directly with students trying to help support them when they're struggling, which is most participants, a lot of the things that I've seen, especially in recent years, is dealing with frustrations about not feeling successful. And I think a big part of that is with Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, you're just not going to have the traditional markers of success that I think currently exist in an American classroom and high school. This idea that someone's going to tell you you're successful. In fact, on these programs, I gather for NSLI-Y, but definitely for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, most of our participants spend a lot of their time feeling like they're not doing very well. They're struggling. Life is challenging, right? Especially for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. You're there for 10 months. You're put into a host family that you don't know. You're put into a high school where you don't know anyone. What skills do you think, and I think this is getting to what makes a successful applicant, what skills do you think make somebody ready for that? And there's no secret answer. There's no way to write some perfect essay that is perfectly grammatically correct and perfectly argues why you should get in. We ask you questions, and I think it's really important, like Emily said, take a look at the websites and the goals and the missions of the program. Take a look at those questions and think, why are we asking you those questions, right? Think about what we're asking you to do. We're asking you to go overseas for 10 months. Maybe you're 15 years old. Have you had to live away from home before? Have you had to solve challenges before, right? On our program, I've recently spent time talking about problems versus challenges, right? There are problems, and like Emily said, and we talked about, staff are there to help solve big problems. I've seen a lot of questions pop up about safety and security. Is the U.S. Embassy involved? How do you is living with a host family safe? That's what we spend a lot of our time managing. However, the participants, our expectations that a successful participant can face a lot of challenges, the challenges that living in an immersion experience will put at you. So I'm just going to kind of leave it out there as a question back to you. What do you think makes a successful participant based on the framework of these programs? And I think this is also a really important point where a lot of these questions, Emily and I are saying, yeah, it's really similar. Yeah, it's really similar. This is one where I would really differentiate. Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad are very different than NSLI-Y in a couple of key ways. And one of them, like Emily said, as a NSLI-Y participant, you need to come to this program prepared to take language learning seriously, right? Emily, this means homework. This means testing. This is really important, right? On Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, you're going into a classroom that could be 100% in Thai, or you could go into a classroom in India or in Jordan where you're in English and you're expected to keep up with schoolwork, right? The level of flexibility and readiness for any possibility is what we expect from you on Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad. So a lot of content coming out of that one, something to think about later. And we're always happy to answer questions offline, kind of in more detail about that, but that's what I would put out there. All right, what is the selection process and timeline? So for all 3 programs, we all have a semifinalist stage. So the deadline, Emily, for NSLI-Y is November 3rd, right? With supporting materials a week later. For Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad, it's December 7th with supporting materials. So this is like parent statement, teacher recommendation, or excuse me, mentor recommendation a week later. Following the deadlines, there will be a screening process, an evaluation, and semifinalists will be notified. We will then move through the semifinalist stage where all semifinalists are interviewed. And you also fill out health forms that are sent into us. Those are kept separate and untouched and unlooked at. For a long time, you have until, I believe, mid-February to do that. However, in the December, January, February timeline where you're being interviewed, your applications are being evaluated by independent evaluators, and then they go to staff for final screening. And then notification takes place for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad early to mid-March, likely. This past year, it was later March. And then for NSLI-Y, Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but summer notification starts usually in March and goes and then academic year programs start in late March, go through April. Great. All right, last fact, and then we get to your questions.
Sky, can I add just two
Please.
more things? Yeah, Sky covered the NSLI-Y timeline. One other thing we think is important to mention is there is a medical review that takes place after selection decisions are made. So it has no bearing in the selection process, but we begin medical review after you are notified as the finalist or alternate. So you really have to be ready to answer any questions or discuss any issues with us that come up in May. Sky talked through departures. The other thing that's really important in the timeline is applying for a passport. If you don't have one that's valid, you want to make sure you apply for one that's valid by January. One thing I wanted to mention that was a common question coming up in the Q&A, Sky, is what is the selection rate? So in my 10 years working on NSLI-Y, we've hovered around the same. The selection rate has been, between like 18% to 26%. So I can't give breakdowns by language or module, but that's overall. Overall, about 20% of students who apply for NSLI-Y have been selected for the program. Sky, I'm not sure if you want to comment on that for Yes Abroad or Flex Abroad.
Sure. For Yes Abroad, the numbers have kind of gone up and down over the years. I would actually say it's not as competitive as you might think. So I definitely want to encourage people to consider it, especially if you're kind of much more focused on study abroad in general rather than language focus. But I will say, I think this past year, it was approximately 25% for Yes Abroad. For Flex Abroad, it was more selective, but I think a lot of the same people apply for the same program. So ultimately, many people who were qualified for Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad kind of either received finalist status or alternate status. And so, yeah, I mean, I think it's probably up there. And I think when we've looked at some of the countries on NSLI-Y, they're pretty equivalent with Yes Abroad. And I also saw a couple of ones about there's some languages that are in higher demand. I mean, generally, I would say, yeah, like probably, and like you said, you can't get into the details of it, but yeah, it does range. All right, should I go on to resources? Okay, and then some of you might be asking, is there anybody besides the two people who are in charge of these programs I can ask for the real information? And the answer is absolutely. We really want you to hear what it's like from people who are on the program and who did the program. So Libby, can we go to the next page, please? All right, so the first, we've talked about the websites. Here they are. We encourage you to go to them and check them out. There's lots of stories on there. You can see in the kind of the top right of the Yes one, it says stories. There's a NSLI-Y interactive that's blocked by the Yes Abroad website. Sorry about that. And you can go and check it out. There's lots of information on there, not only about how to apply and tips for applying. In fact, the Flex page is on top of links to a bunch of videos that we'll talk about in a second, but you can find a lot of information on there, but definitely spend some time going to NSLI-Y Interactive or the Yes Abroad stories from people who are on program. That really gives you an in-person view, I think, of the mindset of the challenges, but also the benefits of these immersion programs. They're really amazing. Next slide. Emily, do you want to talk about social media?
Sure. Here we have, information about our Instagram pages for each program. We all have Flex and Twitter presences as well. And we have a lot of course, photos from participants, but also from the programs. There's often takeovers or IG Live activities that feature, alumni photos and reflections or current participants. So if you want to see a little bit more of what life is like on the programs, please check out our Instagram pages. Next slide.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. No, I was going to say that I was actually just about to answer a question typed, and I'll just answer it live instead. There's a question about how to prepare for interviews. And one of the things I was going to say about the social media and about the videos is that they're an incredible resource if you're interested in preparing for your interview, but also thinking about your essays and honestly preparing for life overseas. We want you to know as much as possible what it's like over there, what skills you're needed. So these are great resources for so many different aspects of the program. And then like you can see on here, there's different playlists, for example, for Yes Abroad and now for Flex Abroad. Since this is our very first year for Flex Abroad, this is our first year of having participants on program. But for both Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, you can see participant videos. Go check those out. Those are videos that participants, when they were on program, made going back like even 10 years of just people kind of doing everyday talking about what the programs are like. And these are not just anyone's, right? Where the participants or alumni are associating their videos with the program. These are ones that staff went through, watched and said, you know what, that's realistic. That's what I've seen before. That's real. So go check that out. And then related to the question about interviews, I would say, go to these websites, follow on social media. Listen to, watch the videos. You should simply spend time preparing for what you think the programs are about. And then when you're preparing for your interviews or you're going to your interviews, be yourself, truly be yourself. I hate to say this so frankly, but staff and evaluators are really experienced with seeing through, how essays and interviews are prepared for, that we really want to see essays that are written by teenagers. We don't need a perfectly crafted, curated essay that's gone through 10 different adult editors' hands. We want to know who we're dealing with, because ultimately that's the teenager that we're going to see on program. That's the person who's going to be experiencing it firsthand. So truly be yourself. There's no archetypal participant. So many Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad participants I've met over the years are so surprised they got into the program, because they say, I never thought that I could get on a program like this. I don't have the best grades in my high school. I don't do all the extracurricular activities. So that I would say, great, right? Your experience overseas is valid. It takes all kinds of people to go on this program. And there's a lot of skills in personality traits. Somebody who doesn't have the best grades and who doesn't do every extracurricular activity can provide and contribute to an exchange experience. Anything to add on resources or on interview, Emily, for NSLI-Y?
No, but on these videos, I wanted to address a question that came up that relates to a video on our playlist. As Skye mentioned, there's playlists for both programs on our channel. One of the videos is related to safety and security. And there was several questions that came up about that. So we have, a separate video we did encourage you to watch related to safety and security. I'll talk about that a little bit since we're getting into Q&A. And I think it'll address several of the questions that came up. As we noted, these programs are programs of the U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. And, naturally, especially in this environment, safety and security are top priorities for us and our partner organizations and State Department. The U.S. embassies or relevant consulates have to approve every Yes Abroad, Flex Abroad, NSLI-Y site. And they are, certainly involved if any security issues arise. The U.S. Department of State's Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs are our primary points of contact, at least Sky and myself, for the program, and they're highly involved in the design and program policies. We have standard guidelines that apply for implementation of all programs. And there's a lot of detail related to safety and security expectations as part of, program staff, but also participants and their parents at home in the terms and conditions. So we'd, advise you reviewing those carefully and being back in touch with us. We have, we could talk about it for a while, which is why we'd encourage you to watch the video to make sure you get all the details. But, we do have a lot of structures in place related to safety and security. But I would say it's really important for participants to be ready to take a safety and security guidance and practice it. Risk management is a team sport, as we say, and participants have a role to play in their safety and security as well. What happens if things go south? I've been working in this field for more than 15 years. Things have definitely gone south or become tenuous. We do evacuate programs if the Department of State determines that that's the course of action that we need to take. All evacuations, in my experience, have looked different. So I can't say what the protocol would necessarily be every time. But one thing that isn't common is that, the State Department would determine if a program needs to be evacuated. And then, we would work carefully in our communication with you all and our implementing organization to facilitate safe travel home. If a student, gets ill on program, we would work with them to provide, to obtain healthcare. And in some cases, students get quite ill and they might need to return home. And then we would work again with the State Department to make plans for medical evacuation. So there's a whole lot of detail related to safety and security in the terms and conditions. We'd also point you to that video and happy to answer any other questions that you might have. Right. So Sky, there's a lot of questions in the Q&A. So I think
I've been trying to pick them off than typing, right, as you were talking.
Yeah. So I know our team is trying to rapidly answer them. I'm going to try to comment on a few, maybe specific to NSLI-Y, and then I will pass it to you. But our team will keep trying to answer your questions in the Q&A function as possible. One question that seems to be coming up often is if there is exceptions that can be made if a student doesn't meet eligibility requirements. And the answer is no. We cannot make exceptions to the date of birth eligibility, even if it's just a couple days, and we can't make exceptions related to federal employment or past participation, particularly in overseas ECA programs. So we are sorry, but we do have to maintain our eligibility requirements. And as Sky noted, those are generally determined by the Department of State. I'm going to pick one other question and then I will pass it to Sky. One thing was about living in host families. There's a lot of questions related to host families in the chat. A lot of our host families don't speak English. Sometimes there might be a host member, maybe one of the children or one of the parents might have a little bit of proficiency in English, but in a lot of cases, the host families don't largely speak English. In NSLI-Y's case, a lot of students will become more and more comfortable with communication with their host family as they're in the program and be able to practice their skills and learn more. But this is why in NSLI-Y's case, the pre-program language preparation is is important because we're working to give you some survival skills. I'm not saying it will be easy on arrival, it will be hard, but this is a way to really experience overseas language immersion and frankly, rapid proficiency gains. So a challenge, but we are trying to prepare you with some survival skills for that. And one other host family question was, do students have their own room? In some situations, maybe, but you may be sharing a room with someone of the same gender. That's probably typical that you might be sharing a room. All of our participants are expected and required to have their own bed. So that is one expectation. Skye, did you want to add anything further related to host families?
No, I think you covered it. So yeah, you wouldn't, we have what we call provisions versus privileges. So the ability to have your own bedroom, the ability to have a host family that supports you as a vegetarian or food preference that you have, those would be considered privileges. But your provision is that you're just a member of the family, you're provided with meals, and your in-country staff works with your host family to vet them. And certainly if you observe any dietary or religious restrictions, these are highly prioritized. We do everything we can to make sure that you are able to receive that accommodation. And then we have seen many vegetarians successfully on programs. Some countries, I will say, for Flex Abroad and Yes Abroad, are easier to find accommodations for when it comes to stuff like that than others. I want to draw special attention to the placement information page in our application where we ask you about health accommodations, or what else is on there, Emily? Those are the kind of the big ones, but it's really important for us to know if you request any such accommodations, from not living in a home with smokers to having a kind of a mobility disability, or have food preferences or restrictions. This can often determine your placement. So not your acceptance into the program, but after we have, made a decision about finalist status, alternate status, we look at where can we place you. And we don't want to put you in a country, for example, if you're allergic to peanuts, in a country that cooks with a lot of peanuts. That would not be good for you. So definitely make sure you fill that out. There was also a question in the chat about medical disabilities and whether or not those can be accommodated. I would say the program does not discriminate on the basis of health at all. We start doing a health review process. We start looking at your health forms and working with an independent medical evaluator who reviews your forms and comes back with questions. Those questions we pass along to you, and you answer them. We pass them back to our medical evaluator. Ultimately, they're the ones who provide us with recommendations or prompt us with things they might find challenging. The question was about NSLI, but I think the answer is yes. Have you had people with diabetes in the program before? Yes. Same with Yes Abroad. We have. Every participant and finalist is different. Every placement is different, but we do our best to make accommodations based on health restrictions. Anything else to add on health?
I think I would just encourage folks, especially at this stage, to maybe do a little bit of research on the potential host countries to see if there might be any issues relevant to your health conditions. All of our programs have a long track record of supporting students with unique health issues and medical issues. It will be important for participants to be able to generally manage those independently on program. And be prepared to engage with program staff after selection, to be ready to manage that medical condition overseas and talk about any medication supply issues and things like that. I'm
currently answering a question about if you have a religious observe a religion that might be sensitive in some countries, is that something you should mention? My answer for that was going to be, you can definitely mention it if you have any placement considerations or concerns. You can mention it, or your caregiver can mention it in their parent statement or the legal guardian statement. That being said, I think a lot of times people are concerned about this. Like, for example, if you're Jewish and you want to study Arabic in Morocco or Jordan, is that going to be something where your safety is involved? In my experience, it's not a big deal. The organizations responsible for monitoring you and placing you there and supporting you there have a lot of really great advice about how to integrate. And so in my experience, it's not really a big issue, but if you are concerned, you should definitely note it. That's something we like to see. There was a question about accommodations in a country for gender identity. Again, this is definitely something that's helpful to know when it comes to the placement process. So if this is something that's, applies to you, I would suggest that you note it. One thing we tell all students or all applicants and finalists when it comes to, shall we say, like all kind of LGBTQ matters, is that the program staff is very open. We support you. We support everyone applying for this program and supporting all people on program. That being said, we cannot control the rules or the laws of the host countries we send people to. So we cannot make exceptions to laws overseas. So for example, in my experience, and from what I know in Senegal, being or engaging in same-sex acts, for example, is against the law. We can't control that, but we have had a number of Yes Abroad participants over the years who identify as LGBTQ. So it's just good to kind of know this stuff. We don't have to know it. For people who are trans or have gender identity, I think that is something that's more helpful to know. Emily, anything kind of specific to add on that?
No, I would echo the same for NSLI-Y. That, it's helpful if you can share some of that with us, as it's might be a consideration in the placement process, but is not considered during selection. And, we've had many students of different gender identities and sexual orientation on program. We will work hard to provide you with information and resources and be available, have staff available to talk to you if you want to talk through some of those issues before departure. And that would be an area too. I would encourage you to try to engage with NSLI-Y alumni if you can. Didn't mention it earlier, but we have a large Facebook group called Ask NSLI-Y Alumni. And if you want to maybe ask some questions about that, there's often a large contingency of alumni who'll be happy to answer. And if you'd rather do that in a more private setting, you can get in touch with our staff and we'll try to make that connection for you.
There was a question that I thought was really helpful about as a cultural exchange, about being first generation American. If your parents are from another country, is that something that's accepted or allowed on program? And I would say absolutely. In fact, I was just looking at a website story from one of our students in Poland, who's first generation American from Mexico, and she actually spent a lot of her life in Mexico and then came back to the United States for high school, and she's having an amazing time. And one of the things we often say on Yes Abroad and Flex Abroad is, like, share your America, right? Everybody's got a different background, and I think what better way to share the culture and the values of the United States with the rest of the world than to show how varied and diverse the United States is and can be. So definitely, please apply. There's no one typical American. In fact, that we like to kind of pride our participants on challenging what does it mean to be an American. A lot of our participants go overseas and have their people in their host community say, okay, but what are you? Like, where are you really from? Oh, it doesn't matter that they're third generation American. And I think that's really great when our participants can challenge that and show them what American means.
One question that I think is a great one to end on, maybe for a live dialogue, Sky. There was a question of, what can I do now to try to prepare to be overseas and prepare for the program? It's a great question. A couple of suggestions I would make, of course, reading more about the program and taking a look at the resources we share to learn more about participant experiences. But a few other things I would try, try some new things in your home community that might be with different groups of people than maybe your typical friend group. Just having experiences with new people and doing new things is a good experience to try to prepare for an overseas experience. And if you can engage in any cross-cultural opportunities in your home community, I know some US communities have more offerings like that than others. But still, if there's any type of like cultural festival in your community that maybe you can attend to start kind of like learning more just about any different culture, even if it might not be your target culture. Just trying some new things, being around different types of people than maybe your usual is a good way to get in the mindset for an overseas immersion experience. Sky, do you have any further comments on that?
No, I think it's just, this is a long process. In fact, a lot of the times I think that we should be, and I try to target middle school students and the parents of middle school students, because getting to the idea of, hey, I want to step away from high school for a year to experience the world is a big topic. Many of you have asked about, how do I work with my school to make sure I get credit? The earlier you think about it, the earlier you can talk to your school about it. If you're even thinking about it, you haven't decided yet to do it, your parents haven't decided yet to let you do it, start talking, talk about it to anybody you can, talk about it to your school, ask what possibilities are out there. So I think that's part of it. The more you talk about it, the more you think about it a lot. Talk about it with your parents or your caregivers over dinner. Think about the possibilities. Have somebody practice asking you why you want to do this program, right? That's what we're going to ask you. Why do you want to do this program? What do you hope to gain out of this program? You know, if you're looking for like a way to be successful in an interview, again, there's no key answer. The answer is our assessment of your interest and ability to be successful on program. And again, what does being successful on program look like? It doesn't mean getting a gold star, being perfect all the time, right? It means truly living the values and the mission of the programs. So I think about it, talk about it, write some sample essays. Honestly, I've heard from so many finalists that they were alternates the first time, or they were non-selects the first time. So if you're 15 and you're not sure you're ready for this, try it anyway. You get so much experience just by going through the process of doing it. You learn so much about yourself through the process of doing it. Not to take a long tangent, but I will say, you know, I was a Peace Corps volunteer back in 2003. I applied when I was in college. I wasn't totally sure what I wanted to do with my life. I was thinking Peace Corps might be an option. And when I first started that application process, I couldn't have told you everything in concrete terms of why I wanted to do this program and what I hope to gain from it and what I could contribute to it. But by the end of filling out that application and by the end of going through the interview process, I knew, right? So the entire going through the process clarified that for me. And so if you're at a place where you're not, I guess I just want to, there's a lot of applicants who are like, I know what I want to do. I know how I can be successful. They come in with a, clear eyes about that, or clear heart, or clear head. I can't even think of the right expression, but there's a lot of people who are like that, but there's a lot of people who aren't. There's a lot of people who are unsure about it, who are scared about it. That's totally okay. Go through this process anyway. You will learn about yourself. You will learn about the programs, and ultimately it'll make you a better participant. So I guess I can maybe end with that. Emily, I don't know if you have anything else to add to that. And I can also stay on here for a few minutes and try to knock off some more of these questions via typing. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I think we'll wrap sort of the live portion, at least the spoken portion of our webinar today. Sky and I will try to stay on along with our colleagues to answer a few more of the questions in the Q&A. Hopefully they are helpful to you. We really appreciate everyone joining us and being here to learn a little bit more about the program. If we don't answer your question now, please don't hesitate to write us, and and we'll be happy to get back to you. But thanks for being here, and we hope to receive your applications. Remember, NSLI-Y application deadline is November 3rd. If you're applying for virtual NSLI-Y, that's October 20th, and Yes Abroad, Flex Abroad, December 7th. So thanks for being with us, and look forward to receiving your applications.
One more note, Emily, just so everyone's aware, when you exit out of the webinar, there will be a form that you can fill out with that you can list your contact information. Should you like to receive further information from NSLI-Y, Flex Abroad, and Yes Abroad, all you have to do is put your name, your email address, and submit the form. Thank you.